What's up, Legion? Welcome back to I Still Call It a Lariat. This is a pro wrestling podcast. My name is Steve Zaff, and today we are all gathered for a very somber moment. With me to talk about this is my good friend Howard Morgan joining us for the first time. Howard, how you doing today?
I'm doing good, Steve. How are you, buddy?
Pretty good, man. And of course, my new star, Mozart Fontaine, coming back, buddy. How you doing, man?
I'm doing great, Steve. Thanks for the invite to jump on, man. This is cool.
Absolutely. So today, unfortunately, this is the first time the three of us are talking on my show, or unfortunately, because we're gathered to talk about the career of Hulk Hogan. Hulk Hogan, who passed away this past week at 71 years old. I want to reiterate, we were talking about the career of Hulk Hogan. Hulk Hogan, the influence on pro wrestling. Hulk Hogan, Howard, we were just talking about this off the air, the superstar, the rock star, whatever you want to call him. Hulk Hogan is all those things. Guys, I just want to talk to you guys about what Hogan's influence would be on Howard. I'll start with you since you're the newest on the show. What would you say Hogan's influence is on you personally as being a wrestling fan? Obviously, not directly connected to the business as Mozart and I are, but still being in love with the business for pretty much lifetime.
Yeah, I'm a lifetime wrestling fan. Watched it pre-Hulkamania, and you know that you've hit that top tier when we have eras, right? We have the Attitude Era, we have all of that stuff, and we have the Hulkamania era, for a better part of 10 years or so. He dominated the WWF, took us on a roller coaster ride. It was never over. Even though when it felt like he was completely beaten, whether it was King Kong Bundy or Big John Studd or the Big Boss Man or whatever big man that they threw at him next, Paul Orndorff, even Roddy Piper. He always found a way to hulk up and win the match. And truly, we were talking, 40 years later, his influence and his legacy, and a part of him is I would dare say in most active wrestlers today, from 40 years ago.
Absolutely.
And we're still riding that Hulkamania wave. And listen, he took us on a roller coaster ride, through his career, through the WWF. We were cheering him, and then unfortunately he broke our hearts when he joined the NWO, and really, it really crushed a lot of people. And then of course his resurgence coming back, and the match that he had with The Rock, the guy has truly done it all. We throw the word icon around with a lot of people. I'm not saying they don't deserve it, but if you're going to use the word icon, I think he is almost the thing you compare it to. Here's what you need to get icon status. And Hulk Hogan hit every one of those boxes.
I almost say that he transcends the word icon. He's our Babe Ruth, right? Like Babe Ruth might not have been the greatest baseball player of all time, but if you say Babe Ruth, you associate Babe Ruth with baseball. If you say Hulk Hogan, you associate Hulk Hogan with wrestling.
Yeah, I go one step further. If you ask even a novice pro wrestling fan that's anywhere from 30 to 70, when you say pro wrestling, Hulk Hogan has got to be or will be one of the first names that comes out of their mouth.
I don't see how you name three people and Hulk Hogan doesn't come out first. Mozart, now you and I are in a little different boat. We have been involved in the business. We have worked in the ring and that. Now I'm going to ask this question to you. Do we have this life? Do we have this career? Am I doing this show right now with you guys if Hulk Hogan doesn't do what he does 40 years ago and runs with the ball the way he does?
Yeah, most likely not. I'm in a unique position, I think, with Hulk Hogan because he wasn't the guy who got me into wrestling, right? So I was already, watching Dusty Rhodes and Superstar Graham and Bob Backlund before that. And I'd actually kind of faded out of it a little bit by the time. But I remember seeing him on TV. I didn't watch the title change. I didn't know about him beating the Sheik. All I knew was that there was this big, good-looking dude that was in Rocky 3, and it captivated me. So that persona, and that's the thing when it comes to Hulk, is persona, persona, persona. There is no transcension of wrestling. So he did, what Fez did before him, what Gorgeous George did after, in the same era for TV. Hulk took it to the next level because George took it to being a TV star. Hulk took it to being a global pop star.
Yeah. We the business has changed from pro wrestling to sports entertainment, obviously, or initially at one point. Can we say that Hulk Hogan is the sports entertainer? Like, he is the sports entertainer. He's that guy. He's the reason. He's the reason we call it that, right?
Yeah. So when you reached out earlier about the show, and I started thinking, what's the impact? So the impact is Vince is going national. You can't do it without a star, and you need the star. And I think that the choice for it to be Hogan, I'm like, could it have been somebody else? I don't know. I mean, I can't say it couldn't have been, but they wouldn't have had the same impact. I mean, again, you had to look.
I don't think so either.
The charisma, and enough wrestling ability. He'd been trained by a hooker. I mean, he knew how to shoot. Like, Hogan wasn't, a schlep. I mean, let's face it. He didn't need to be that in the ring, but that bigger than life, larger than life cartoon character, every kid in the world. And again, I wasn't not a fan. I was a fan. It just didn't. I think for me, it wasn't the impact of that's who got me into the wrestling business, because I was kind of watching it before that, and that's not what made me want to get in. But I'll tell you, and I can relate this to a perfect example. We have a hometown hero in Delaware here, Mike Wilmer, the Cheetah Master, and whenever you would wrestle Cheetah, the roof would come off the place. He had that same type of charisma. So I can only imagine. We're in a 500, 500 and below seat buildings for the most part, and I can only imagine being in thousands of people when Hulk would blow you know, the ceiling off the place. And I'll tell you another quick story. I remember I was never a huge sports fan, but the local church would run all these these little bus activities to go see, like, the Phillies play or the 76ers in Philadelphia. And we went to a 76ers game, and word was that Hulk Hogan was in the building. Now, I highly doubt that he was, but we could have cared. Even the hardcore basketball fans could have cared less about the 76ers. We were running around the Spectrum trying to find Hulk Hogan and get an autograph. So yeah, there was a pop star iconism that even transcended my love of wrestling. I'm like, I don't care that he's a wrestler. That's Hulk Hogan. He's a star.
He's a star.
That's the thing. Is that's what I think you were getting at? Is, do we sit here without that? Yeah, probably not, man. Because that was a star that transcended wrestling, and he was the right star at the right time, at the right play, at the right era.
I mean, exactly like you said, the stars kind of aligned. There was talks at one point that if it wasn't Hogan, it would have been Snuka. And I don't know if we're talking about a multi-billion-dollar industry if the start of it was Snuka. Realistically, it kind of had to be Hogan. Hogan was what Superstar Billy Graham was. He just hit it at the right time. If Superstar Billy Graham was around when Hogan was doing stuff and he was healthy and he was still in his prime, maybe it works. But Hogan was there. He did it right. He was there to do it. And like I said, his influence on this business. You always talk about the house, when how's the house tonight? How's it drawn? What are we looking at? Whether it was, I heard Bubba Ray Dudley say this on his show, and he's like, let's face it, Hogan was the house, because I heard other people talk about this, that you checked, if you were on a show and you were doing a tour, you checked for Hogan's name before you checked for your own, because you knew the house was going to fill up and you knew that you were going to make more money that way. And, Mozart, you and I spoke about this, and I'm sure me and Howard have probably said this. At the end of the day, the name of the business is still putting an ass every 18 inches. And Hogan for sure did that. Now, will I ever say that he was the greatest wrestler on the face of the planet? No, because whether it's arguable or not, I still think that still kind of belongs to Flair in my humble
Yeah.
opinion. But at the same time, Flair has admitted Hulk Hogan was the greatest superstar to ever grace that ring. And it's hard for me to argue that. He's everything. I'm the generation after you, Mozart. So it's Howard, Mozart, me. I am the Hulkamaniac. I am the guy that
Wow,
at
he took
3
a
years.
shot at me. I think Mozart, he called me old without calling me old.
It's not
I
hard.
did at least I did it nicely.
That's because you said it nicely.
Hey, listen, man, you got to see those people that I still watch nowadays live. So I'm a little
Well,
jealous of you.
well, and here's the thing. You talked about Snuka, right? Could Snuka have carried the torch? Yeah, for a couple of months. There was talks about Dusty Rhodes coming in and being that. Yeah, he could have done it for maybe a year and a half. What Hogan had was longevity. He picked up that torch and he ran with it for years, a decade, a
Exactly.
better part of a decade, and anybody in that
what
time,
84 to
84
till like 91.
yeah.
He was
So
still Hogan, like until 92 even.
yeah. So, and nobody, in that era, and I'm not, no disrespect to, Tito Santana, Jimmy Snuka and all those guys that were there then, no disrespect to them. They just didn't have that that Hogan had. Like Mozart was saying, he just that look, the body, the image, and he was larger than life at times, and he capitalized on it. The merchandise, the movies, the TV shows, the cartoons, the videos, the TV appearances, you name it. Hogan was on everything. In the 8,
Yeah.
9, 10 years that he did it, there wasn't a thing that you couldn't buy that didn't have Hulk Hogan on it.
I agree. And WrestleMania is birthed because of Hulkamania.
Yes.
That's not even arguable. That's without Hulkamania, there is no WrestleMania. There is no Super Bowl of pro wrestling. There is no, and like I said, we're not talking today on this show. Maybe podcasts are still a thing. Who knows? I don't know how history would go. Again, butterfly effect stuff. But
Right.
if Hulk Hogan's not the guy, if Hulk Hogan doesn't carry the banner the way he does, this show is, I still call it a comic book magazine instead of, I still call it a Lariat, because it's going to be a comic book show at that point. Hulk Hogan was my original superhero. Hulk Hogan made me believe that the good guy can win, that it paid to do the right thing. That the right thing wasn't always the easy thing, but it was the right thing, and that's why you did it. And whether that translates to anyone else, that's something that I tried to pride my life on because of 1985 Hulk Hogan, because of 1986 Hulk Hogan. Watching him, there's so many things that he's done. Howard, you touched on some of the moments. I mean, Mozart, you touched on some of the moments that made you remember. I remember being a little kid, sitting on my dad's lap, staying up way too late because I shouldn't have been up that late, and watching Hulk Hogan on Primetime Wrestling. And for the viewers and the listeners who don't remember Primetime Wrestling, that was the predecessor to Monday Night Raw. You had Monday night was Primetime Wrestling on USA. That was the original show. And I remember seeing it and just thinking, my God, that was, and I didn't get to see the live of Hogan slamming Andre at WrestleMania 3. But the following year was my first ever wrestling event at WrestleMania 4. And I was in the crowd when he slammed Andre that day. And to this day, it still sits not even far back in the memory. It's always there. Like, my God. And Hogan, the pop he got in an Atlantic City crowd that wasn't really there for wrestling. A lot of them were there because they were Trump and Vince's friends. And Hogan still got that crowd to their feet. Like, that was who Hulk Hogan was to me. Was he's that guy. Guys, I want to go through his career kind of in order a little bit with you guys.
Sure.
His original run with the WWF, which might have still been the WWF when he first got there, was as a heel. He was with Blassie originally, and a lot of obviously current fans probably don't remember that because Howard, I'll lump myself in there with you. We're all effing old right now. But the fact of the matter is a lot of current fans probably don't remember a svelte Andre the Giant just beating the tar out of Hulk Hogan every time they weren't they weren't alive for the Shea Stadium show.
Right. Yep.
But that's the thing, is that show that was as important to Hogan as kind of almost that was the first big Hulk Hogan thing. And then he gets offered the spot in Rocky 3, and Mozart, you talked about Rocky 3, and I mean, Thunder Lips, the Ultimate Man.
The Ultimate Man,
baby.
yeah.
I mean, what's so cool about that is that Stallone is a wrestling fan, is a wrestling fan. And if you look at that, I was always a combat sports guy. Like, I was watching the boxing as a kid. I didn't know what I was watching. I was watching wrestling, didn't know what I was watching, right? I do remember that run too, with when Hulk would come out with the big white cape with Classy Freddie Blassie, and my grandfather's like, oh, it's just a piece of trash, and Andre's gonna, and I'm like, who's this guy? I didn't know. So I'm like, oh wow, I knew him as the heel, right? And then he was a heel in Rocky. So what's really interesting about the Rocky, and I implore people to go back and watch it, because in number one Rocky, all the Rockies were just really, really well done. I mean, I think they don't get a lot of credit, because when you look at the fight game, it shows where that work became a shoot, which was kind of something that was, the lines were always kind of blurred in real life. Even sometimes still are. Somebody doesn't like somebody. There's that great line, and I'll mess it up, but Stallone's Rocky says to him something like, "Hey, you got crazy on me out there," and this is my favorite. I have two favorite memories of Hogan. This is one of them. Is when his eyes get real big. That's the name of the game out there, brother. Because he was telling you in the script, that's the name of the game. We're here to put on a show. And Stallone was just like, okay, well, maybe you should have let me know that before you kicked my ass, right? that scene was so incredible to me that you just got goosebumps, like, because it told me everything I needed to know about combat sports. Like, yeah, you can go out there and be friends with somebody and still whip the crap out of them, right? Or you can not be friends with somebody and have an incredible chemistry with them, which is really the name of the game. It's about the business, that butt every 18 inches. And I'm probably going to jump ahead, but my other favorite memory was late in the, life, and I was already in wrestling as a journey, watching he and The Rock just turn a crowd and basically do what was right for business that night. I'll never forget that, because it was really like the art in its finest, from two guys who probably understand how to work a crowd better than just about anybody else.
I mean, he's one of those guys that got the business, right? Like, he understood. He has said it in the past that he's not the greatest wrestler to ever live, because like he says it all the time, Flair's had hundreds of hour-long matches. He goes, I don't think I've ever had any. He goes, but again, in those shorter matches that he's had, how much emotion have you felt? That's where I always go with is, are you emotionally invested into what is happening and what is going on? And Hogan for better or worse, when he was a face or when he was a heel, absolutely made me emotionally invested into what was going on. I mean, like you said, Mozart, he went from that original heel run, and then we went into Rocky 3, and he was Thunder Lips, the Ultimate Male, baby. I'm always gonna say it like that. And then he goes into the AWA from there, and that's the real start of Hulkamania, right? That's the first time that we get him tearing off the shirt, and that's the first time we get him going after a real world title, because before that, I don't think they ever had any plans on. I don't think Vince Sr. had any plans on putting the world title on Hulk Hogan. So the AWA and him versus Bockwinkel, and truthfully, that's kind of the start of the forever feud that is him and Bobby Heenan, right? Like that's and talk about two legends, three legends if you're counting Bockwinkel in that. You know, I mean, if you want to talk about a wrestler's wrestler, you got Nick Bockwinkel, and then you got the star power of Hulk Hogan, and I don't even think it's arguable at this point. Bobby the Brain Heenan is the greatest manager to ever set foot in this business.
Nothing he couldn't do. He worked, he commentated, he wrestled. Every single thing
He
that
bumped,
Master Bobby did.
everything.
Yeah. He was the bumping manager you wanted. He was the guy that he was a worker, and he realized how much better he was at managing. So when he wrestled, it was a special occasion. And like I said, Hogan in the AWA, if Vern doesn't not want Hogan to have the title the way he does, maybe we don't get Hulkamania the way we do, because
you're right, because Vern in the AWA always wanted a wrestler, a true wrestler, to hold it. It's a wrestling title, right? This isn't sports entertainment. This is long before you had thought about sports entertainment. The sign on the marquee says wrestling. I'm not going to have this guy who's not a wrestler, although trained partially by Vern. You know, he's not a wrestler. He's never wrestled in the Olympics, high school. He's just a good-looking big guy that can move, that can get either heat or get a cheer from the crowd. But Vern was like, I'm not putting the title on him because he's not a quote-unquote wrestler.
Yeah, and that was Vern's thing. I mean, even later Vern stuff, you talk about, he put the title on Rick Martel. Rick Martel still fits more of that mold than Hogan does.
Right.
Vern wanted the consummate wrestler.
You know what?
Hogan.
Oh, go ahead, Steve.
And Hogan was the guy that, and again, I don't know if they put the title on Hogan if Vern does it right. I think this is the start of Vince Jr., I guess it would be Vincent Kennedy McMahon, doing everything correctly. Mozart, you were going to say, though.
Yeah, that's the rabbit hole. Howard and I go down a lot of rabbit holes on our show on Wednesday nights. But what if he did put the title on? How does history play out then? Because I think you're right. I don't think it would have been done right. I don't think there would have been the resources, because not only did we get the true birth of Hulkamania when he beat Sheik for the title, the Iron Sheik, that is. What we got is the birth of, now we're bringing in superstars. Now Vince is bringing in people. Howard and I talked about this the other night. Ozzy Osbourne was a part of a lot of those early wrestling. So now you've got major mainstream superstars from other genres. You've got sports superstars coming in from other genres. Do we get that if it's Vern? And I say no. And the other side of that is,
I agree. I don't think so.
What was the brilliance of it is Vince's long vision was, if you guys are all fans of, you know, we all came up in the Northeast, so we, by default, we watched a lot of the Capital Wrestling, WWF, WWF, and then WWE. It was always an ethnic-based group. So you had a Pedro Morales, you had Tito Santana, you had Jimmy the Superfly Snuka, you had Bruno, the ultimate ethnic wrestler. What I've heard and observed over the years is they wanted somebody who appealed to all of America: the blonde hair, the blue eyes, the very, Hogan, very just generic sounding name. So he appealed to everybody, Hulk based off of the Marvel comic because he's huge.
Yep.
They wanted something that appealed to a mass crowd. Now, and he was already using Hulk, I know, but it's still, that's probably why that stuck, is they wanted something, Vince, not they, wanted something that appealed to such a mass crowd. He wanted other genres to say, hey, I want to be involved with this because this dude, Hulk Hogan, is a superstar. He's not just a wrestler. Because again, if you took a Dusty and you took even a Nature Boy or one of the greatest in ring ever, Harley Race, I don't know that you get that crossover appeal that Hulk brought, right, Steve? I mean, Howard, is that fair to say?
I don't think so. I think if anyone you get that appeal from, it might be Flair. And realistically, if we're looking at NWA side of things, I love Dusty. I love Dusty with all my heart. I don't know if he does it, because even with the WrestleMania stuff, when they were talking to him, he said it himself, and Cody has quoted him as saying this. He said he just didn't get it. And the fact that he didn't get it meant he didn't want, was the reason why he didn't want to go do it, because if he couldn't get it, he couldn't pour himself into it. And
Right.
do I think that Dusty could have done this? Absolutely. But the fact that he knew himself well enough to know that he couldn't grasp it the right way means that he made the right choice for him. Honestly, on the NWA side of things, if there was someone that was going to do mainstream, it would have been Magnum. And unfortunately, we'll never know because of what happened with Magnum.
Yeah.
But like you said, the funny thing with the Hulk Hogan name is it's still an ethnic name. They wanted to make him Irish. That's why he was Hulk Hogan. And the funny part is the deep dive on the deep cut, if you will, for your musical fan over there, Mozart, is that's also the reason why they made him from California, is because of the huge Irish contingent in California throughout history. So like, they knew what they were doing, but also, who doesn't want to be from Venice Beach, California, and who doesn't want to be tan and blonde and, have 24-inch pythons and, all of that. Hogan was all of those things. And just again, just talking about him now, like I'm becoming a little kid again, just thinking about Hogan.
No, absolutely.
Like I remember I might be the only person on the planet who, when he won the title at WrestleMania 9, I was happy. Like I might be the only guy, but I was, because I was at my friend's house watching it when it happened. And I remember, yes, this is amazing. And I was still a Hulkamaniac. That was 10 years. I was 10 years old. You can't tell a 10-year-old kid what not to like or what to like. Oh
Well,
man. But
let me ask you this. I mean, because I don't know if you go back that far, but it was Piper's Pit. Andre had just turned heel,
Andre
and
just turned heel.
Piper's bringing Hogan out, and Hogan refuses to fight Andre. He won't do it. He won't do it. He won't do it. And then Andre goes to rip his shirt off. Well, in the process, he rips his cross off completely by accident and nicks Hulk Hogan. There's a little bit of blood on there. And Piper looks at it, and Piper, being the professional that he is, he's like, Hulk, you're bleeding. Like, this undefeatable icon that we've, come to know over all these years, maybe Andre is the guy to finally take down Hulkamania. And it added just a little bit more realism to what was going on. And all of that, it was, again, an accident that he got cut. Piper picked right up on it. And it added just a little more tension, a little more drama to an already tense situation. To me, I was like I was like, wow, Hogan completely. Maybe he is. Listen, on any given day, right? They
Yeah,
say it in football, any given Sunday.
maybe he's human.
Hogan can lose. Maybe right. Maybe some of this is human.
Maybe he's human. And Hogan's given a lot of theatrical interviews, even in real life and in the world. And one of the things that he said on one of his DVDs, I think I had, that he was talking about that. And it's one of the things I fully buy into when he said it was, he goes, it's a real, it might have been in his book even. It's a very, very interesting feeling that he had watching his cross get torn off and seeing it on the ground on top of his shirt. And like, he said a little bit of that was kind of why he started getting as emotional as he did about it. And, like you said, Howard, it's a happy accident. But again, Mozart, you kind of mentioned it. The stars aligned every time that we needed something to happen. And Hogan is the antithesis of what wrestling was for decades before he came around. He was a long reigning babyface champion. That's not what you do. And Mozart, you can obviously attest to this. This is, you're about as much of a wrestling historian as I am, and you keep the heel the champion.
Dusty said it best. The thrill is in the chase. The good guy's got to chase the bad guy.
When you hit that lightning in the bottle is when you can run with your babyface as a champion. They hadn't had that since Bruno. Bruno was, it was traditionally, what's interesting about WWF was it was traditionally ran opposite of what Steve just said, where the money was in the chase, the heel was the champion longer. They were able to have a 13-year run with Bruno, which was probably unprecedented in the wrestling world. I mean, Thez had some pretty long runs and was a baby face, but you're talking a whole different game, a different industry back then.
Yeah.
You're traveling, but for one particular area, it was unheard of in that aspect. And Hogan changed that after maybe probably a close to over 10, maybe 15-year gap of having that long run. And he kind of changed the industry overall for that, because all they did was throw every bad guy, every heel that we could ever think of. I was sure that Paul Orndorff was going to beat him. I was sure Roddy was going to beat him. I was sure King Kong Bundy was going to beat him. I was pretty sure, and that's the other thing about Hogan was, you mentioned that he was human. Yeah, he's the immortal Hulk Hogan, but man, he's one of these guys is going to knock him off because they're just too evil. Kamala was crazy. You didn't know if he was going to be able to keep the belt. Um, Macho was technically sound, and can he beat Macho Man? I mean, come on, Once they started progressing his persona development, and the other guys are becoming, bigger personas throughout wrestling, they were just masterful at lining up heels for him. Much like on the flip side of that, you had a whole slew of excellent money drawing baby faces that would chase the champion. It was the easiest formula, easy formula. Everybody wanted to see Harley get beat, but they couldn't beat Harley. Everybody wanted to see Flair get beat, but Flair was going to slide his way out of it.
Yeah.
Hogan was winning very definitively, which is what a babyface should do, right? If you want to be a real hero,
if he's going to win, he's got to win, and he's got to, and you gotta finish it. Actually, I remember there's a line in a Macho Man match. One of the commentators say, "Yeah, if he wins tonight," I think it was him and Andre were working that night, and there was a point where Andre was almost counted out or was about to be counted out, something along those lines. Or he did get, it was something where there was a count out in there, and they're like, "Yeah, that's great. Macho gets the winner's share of the purse, and he keeps the title, but you want to definitively put somebody down so that they can't come back." That was when they were still keeping that sport aspect to it. Was
Right.
You want to send somebody to the back of the line, you pin their shoulders to the mat, you make them submit. You get them to say, "I give up," or whatever it is, to get to the other side of them, because that was the only way to really do it. And that was, in the 80s, that was the sport aspect of it. Was Hogan would pin your shoulders to the mat, which means you needed a new heel for him. And I'll give WWF all the credit in the world. They churned out some of those heels very quickly and very nicely. I mean, whether it was like you said, King Kong Bundy, Andre, Harley, I think went after him a little bit. Later in the late 80s, early 90s, you even had Mr. Perfect chasing him for a little bit, which was an interesting run. And that was DiBiase. Obviously, DiBiase. DiBiase is kind of the one. He's always the big bad sitting around the corner one way or another. So
Sergeant Slaughter was a fun one that I never expected to be that over when they turned turned Slaughter heel, and Hogan had to defend America. Again, this when you think of his persona, and it's just kind of dawning on me now because we're discussing it, is how universal it was. I mean, he was, like you said earlier, the guy everybody wanted to be. Venice Beach, hanging and banging. He's tan, he's blonde, he's blue-eyed, he played bass guitar. He's a great persona. He's a talker. He's tough in the ring. So that's the wrestling world. And then when you look outside the wrestling world, he's just, now he's going to defend America. Now you've got mainstream people like, well, who's this traitor? We're in the Gulf War and Slaughter's going to turn, and oh my goodness, how does that? Who's coming to? You would expect, if you're your traditional wrestling booker, well, let me create an American hero. Let me put him in red, white, and blue. No, it was the red and yellow, and it worked so well.
And I mean, let's face it. I talked a little bit about Hogan being in the house. If it wasn't Hogan, does WrestleMania 3 draw the number? Do we? I mean, if it's not Hogan versus Andre, don't get me wrong. Steamboat and Savage are on that show, and that I literally have a plaque of Steamboat and Savage up on my wall right over here. That is one of my favorite matches of all time.
Yeah.
Does that draw 93,000 people? Regardless of if you think that number's real or not, does that fill the Pontiac Silverdome?
No, I think there's and Howard and I talked about this. There's a saying that Hogan and Andre drew the house, but Savage and Steamboat entertained the house, or something to that effect. Probably pretty accurate, because I don't think at the time, and maybe ever, unfortunately, would. And Steamboat, as you guys know, is near and dear to my heart. He's one of my favorites ever. I think all around, Steamboat's the greatest to ever do it, just in every aspect. That's my opinion. Nothing Steamboat couldn't do. But I think that from a marketability standpoint, no, he didn't have that passion that Hogan brought. You weren't going to have him. He couldn't have done what Hogan did, in my opinion, in terms of for wrestling. But I think that those two matches for that card, so Steamboat and Savage to me shifted the industry to, okay, we can have these really good technical matches. We can see a bunch of false finishes. We can see all this excitement. That's okay now. Now we can market matches as on a large level like that, because they had been around. There's a lot of classics before that, but that's the classic that really changed the game for that. But Hogan and Andre changed the game for the house.
That's the business.
I think anything from, I've heard anything from 78,000 to 93. It doesn't matter. It's still a lot of people. That was unheard of at the time.
Unheard of. You didn't draw houses like that, especially not. I mean, you didn't run stadiums like that. Like, yeah, they did stadiums, but they didn't run stadiums like that. That was, and if you go back and you look at the picture of WrestleMania 3, that crowd, the look of that crowd, the sky shot of how many people are in that building, it's almost daunting to see. Like, it's intimidating to see that. And I said this, me and my wife actually just watched that main event again, the WrestleMania 3 main event, Hogan versus Andre, and three things stood out with that main event to me always. One is the crowd and how over Hogan was. The funny one that stood out is, for my wife, is I told her that in that match, Hulk Hogan was in his early 30s, and my wife laughed and said he looks like he's 65 in that match. But I mean, that was guys in the mid 80s. Arn Anderson was 25 and he still looked like he was 75. Hogan, though, and this is Hogan being smart about things. This is Hogan this wouldn't have worked for anyone else on this show. I remember the story, how the story I've heard goes is that at WrestleMania 3, because everyone was coming down on that high-low that looked like the ring. And Andre goes down, and when they bring it back to bring Hogan out, it breaks. I heard it broke. And they didn't know how long it was going to take to fix it. And instead of like wasting time or doing anything, Hogan goes, just hit my music. And he walked to the ring. Hogan's the only guy that night that walks to the ring. And the pop he got and the energy that I'm sure he felt going out to the ring like that. And again, it wouldn't have worked for anyone but him. But he comes out and he's got the bandana partially in his mouth and he's pointing at everybody and he's doing the Hogan stuff. And again, I'm getting fired up thinking about him doing it now. And like I said, I can't see. And it's funny because in the course of the match, and it's not a super long match, it only took the time of the match for them to fix whatever was wrong with it, because Andre still rode the thing back.
Right.
But Hogan was smart enough to go and just take his entrance. And, you know, it was a long walk, and he just got that crowd fired up for however long a walk that was. And Real Americans playing, and it's blaring through there. And, you know, it's such a crucial scene. It's almost that him walking out to me for WrestleMania 3, the way he walked out is almost as important to WrestleMania 3's main event as the stare off.
Yeah.
You know,
Keep them, not like you said, not only walking that, 7.5 miles it was to the ring, keeping them, engaged that whole time. So you got to understand, to put it in perspective, he gets them engaged the second he comes through the curtain. They're cheering him all the way to the ring, right? And then all through the match. So he had them captivated the entire time, even though he walked. I mean, that's a feat in of itself. Whether he wins or loses at this point really shouldn't matter. But the way he had everybody kind of eating out of the palm of his hand, as the old expression goes, and he knew what to do. He knew how to get the crowd fired up. Listen, he didn't have. He didn't have a whole lot. His moveset, at least here in the United States, was not that great. Maybe 5 or 6 moves he had. He could point to a crowd walking down; they would react to it. He would shake his head. As he was getting, beat half to death. You'd hit him that one more time, and his head would pop up, and his lips would come out. People knew stuff was about to get real again, and they reacted to it. And he knew, and again, he knew exactly when to do it, when to turn it on, when to turn it off, when to turn it back on. Almost it almost like he had in the sport of professional wrestling, he had the Midas touch. Everything he touched turned to gold and was a hit.
Absolutely. And I mean, not just as part of wrestling, but let's face it, Hogan is part of pop culture. He's the first wrestler to ever be on the Sports Illustrated cover. I'm not going to say that it's a critical or a cultural masterpiece, but he does no holds barred. And that's the first time WWF goes kind of into the movie industry.
Yeah. Yep.
How many interview segments outside of wrestling did Hulk Hogan do? Whether it was Larry King or Arsenio Hall or The Tonight Show or whatever he did. And, kind of how you said he knows how to turn it on and turn it off. He knew how to turn on the charm as well and sit there and have an engaging conversation while also building up his product. That's a skill in and of itself. And, whether we want to be called this or not, Mozart, we're salesmen. That's what wrestling is we're salesmen. And I don't know of a better salesman than Hulk Hogan. And I say that with the greatest respect. Let's go on to some of his WCW stuff though, because I know that's kind of as important as his WWF stuff. Is He goes to WCW. When did he got there? I believe 94 originally.
Sounds about right. Yeah.
Yeah, I believe he gets there in 94. While as the story goes, is Bischoff saw him because they were shooting on the same lot for WCW Saturday Night, and he was on there for Thunder in Paradise.
Yeah.
Because this was he was almost saying he was done with wrestling, and then Bischoff lured him back in, and thank God he did, because if Bischoff doesn't lure him back in, we don't get Bash at the Beach 1996. We don't get him as the third man in I'm sorry, John Cena, in the greatest heel turn in the history of the business.
And again, would that have worked with any other wrestler?
I mean,
that was
again,
active at the time.
They talk like kind of how they were talking about Snuka. They were talking about Sting. I don't know if Sting pulls this off the same way.
Right.
And Hogan, it's funny because what made Hogan the great heel in this sense was all the things that made him a great babyface originally, but was kind of waning on why he wasn't such a great babyface anymore. He was still cutting the same promos where Hall and Nash were cool. And you know, Hogan's cutting 1978 Memphis promos.
Right.
Which in 1997 wasn't cool, which is why you didn't want him to win. And Mozart, I definitely want to get you in on this. I mean, the 96 Bash, you were pretty close to jumping into wrestling, if not in wrestling already, right?
I was just in '96. I had just met Jim Kettner. We were doing local TV. He was doing local TV, and one of my good friends at the time took me up to see. He was interning at the cable radio station, so I had just gotten into Ring Crew. I had just gotten back into watching wrestling again because although I stayed kind of always stayed in touch. I wasn't maybe diehard at that point in time. I was kind of tired of the Hogan shtick at that point in time, the red and yellow. I'm like, all right, man, I'm older now. This isn't really playing to me. I never expected the turn, and I thought it was brilliant. I thought it was unbelievably brilliant. I was like, there we go. Now we've reinvented him. Now people care in a different way again. I don't know from an artistic standpoint, I don't know if he's ever done interviews on it or not, but now he's showing, hey, this is where I started out kind of as a heel. I can show you what I can do now. I don't have to be, the take my, vitamins, say my prayers guy anymore, but I'm still the baddest dude. I still got the handlebar mustache. I still got the biggest arms. I'm just cool. So when you said, I laughed, I was off camera for a minute. I laughed when you said the 78 or 70s Memphis promos because that's all they were, and it was hilarious.
That's what he was doing, is he was cutting 70s Memphis promos. And I saw this I guess it'd be a meme at this point. It was a picture of the interview, obviously, afterwards, and it's Hogan, it's Nash, it's Hall, and it's Mean Gene doing the promo. And we're already speaking on somber things, and this is going to take us down another notch, and I'm sorry, guys, but only one of those guys is still with us, and and for those three legends, or those four legends, that's a little sad. That's a big piece of our business, of my childhood, of my youth, being gone. Hall, Hogan, Mean Gene. I mean, how many interviews did Mean Gene give with Hogan? Like countless.
I mean, that Mean Gene line was just as iconic as anything as Hogan did. Again, that transcended wrestling.
It was as big as What You Gonna Do. It was probably as big as him tearing off the shirt. But the NWO, I mean, the NWO is the real start to the Attitude Era, as far as I'm concerned. That's it. We don't get, and we talk about we wouldn't be doing this if it wasn't for Hogan. Well, the biggest drawing time in pro wrestling was the Attitude Era, right? Like that's the realism of the Attitude Era. Do we get that without the NWO?
We may not have, and that's a good point I never thought about too, because I think so much of that credit goes to ECW and the Philadelphia Extreme style, which fair, rightfully so,
It
that gave
deserves.
to it. But again, when you talk about a national level, unfortunately, and I'll be very honest, and I think all those guys would agree, if that sold on a national level, they would have never closed. So Hogan helped to sell that attitudinal era. Now, again, people say, "Oh, but Mozart," no, they weren't doing the stuff that they were doing in ECW, but the attitude, the the point of it is what I'm trying to say is what sold to the national audience. Oh,
Exactly.
now these guys have an attitude. Now they're going to run roughshod over everything. Now and again, this is always a debate in pro wrestling. Um, you don't always have to be the big guy to be the big star, hence Rey Mysterio. But you are probably you're the as Dr. Tom Pritchard once told me, in that case you're the exception. Don't think you're going to be the exception. So what I'm saying is most of the time the bigger guys were the bigger stars in those days, and even kind of still that could be argued still. So you had three big guys taking, to your point, Steve, the attitude uh, that Steve Austin and Vince and Crew and Mick Foley and all those guys ran with, and the ECW guys helped to put to the mainstream level.
Well,
It,
and like you said, WWF
yeah,
doesn't pivot
mm-mm,
and become and do
no,
DX and do Stone Cold,
right,
and or maybe they do Stone Cold, but they don't run with Stone Cold the way they did.
exactly,
Well,
Like
that
I
whole
could,
thing in the beginning was, with WCW and NWO, obviously started with Scott Hall first, and he really, because, even back then, WWF didn't acknowledge WCW and vice versa. We didn't talk about the other company, but Scott Hall was kind of not only breaking that barrier between the two, but he was breaking that fourth wall between me as the fan and you as the wrestler and giving me information that I shouldn't have, and saying things like, well, you know who I am. Yeah, we know you're Razor Ramon,
yeah,
but you never said you were Razor Ramon, to the point to where, WWF is trying to tell them, stop, stop. And they're like, well, WCW's playing them. What are we doing? He
yeah.
never said he was Razor Ramon. He
He
never
never
said
say.
Diesel was coming. Never
Yep.
said it.
In
But then
fact,
Hulk Hogan
I
kind
think
of
it was
solidified that.
weeks. I think it was
Oh, yeah.
weeks before they used any name for him.
Right.
There was and there was a point where, because I think going into Bash at the Beach, I think there was a little while, or no, they had one or two matches before that, and I think it was like whatever their first pay-per-view match was the first time that I knew they were being called Kevin Nash and Scott Hall.
Right. Yeah.
And like, because I had never heard it. Like, oh, these are the guys. I heard them called the Outsiders. I heard them called, oh, it's this guy. And then Nash shows up and, oh, the big guy's here now.
The big guy. Yep.
I don't remember them calling either one of them by a name until finally they came out with their real names on their gear. And I was like, okay, so at least we have a name to go by. And I remember even being a teenager and being like, well, it's obviously just whatever name they're calling them. That can't be their real name. I mean, they were Razor Ramon and Diesel. Like, who are these guys? Because like Scott Hall and Kevin Nash are actually good work names. Like, that's the other thing about it, is they had good natural work names. But like I said, if the NWO is not as big as it is, does WWE have to readjust their formula? Or if it's not as cool as it is or as big as it is, we're still getting Duke the Dumpster Josie, and I have no problem with Mike, but still, Duke the Dumpster Josie. We have TL Hopper and all the and
yeah,
we get a Mantar or whatever.
Yeah.
We're gonna keep getting that Bastion Booger, and I love Bastion. I love Bastion Booger as a worker, but it's a terrible gimmick.
But you know what, though? Here's another great point: is that you think about everybody you just named, they were all kind of geared toward kids.
Yeah,
Maybe 6, 7, and under were okay with those names and those personas. We were growing up. As Hogan, from the original onset of Hulkamania, never really lost his crowd because he wasn't so unbelievable and so silly. And yeah, we knew his first name wasn't Hulk, but Hogan was a real, like you said, an Irish name. That was the intent. He was presented as a real person. He wasn't like half man, half bull. Like that. That's where the silliness of the personas weren't going to make them any more money, and it was literally dying a real. Actually, it wasn't a slow death; it was a fast death.
Yeah.
Um, and then even going back to putting smaller, I don't want to say smaller, but normal sized guys like Shawn Michaels and Brett on top wasn't really working for them like it was in the Hogan era. So again, back to your point, if you don't have the NWO and you don't have that fire lit for the Monday Night Wars, where does wrestling end up? Where are we at this point in 2025? You know?
Yeah, I mean, do
Yeah.
they does wrestling draw the money that they did during those times that carry them through the PG era when there was only one company? Because it's hard to do we get only one company? Do we get a real Monday Night War even, or is it just the three of us are sitting there and we're like, well, we're still watching both companies and maybe even ECW. I don't know. And then obviously even towards the end of his WCW run, he went back to the red and yellow. I will not count the Vince Russo part of WCW. I like to cut off when he goes back to the red and yellow, because I remember him coming out back to the original American made music, and I still watch it occasionally because I pop for it now, and I'm 43 years old. Like I'm a grown ass man, and Hulk Hogan coming back out after being Hollywood, and Shivani and Heenan played it perfectly, with Heenan being like, I'm just watching Steiner, and Shivani being like, do you hear the music? And he goes, yeah, it's the old wait. And like it almost sounded like they really didn't know that he was going to come out as Hulk Hogan again. And if they did, great on them for being professionals. And if they didn't, great on WCW for doing that, because that was money. Because I don't know, 10,000-15,000 people in that arena popped huge. I hadn't. It was the first time I'd heard a Hogan pop in 4 or 5 years at that point, or 3 or 4 years at that point. And of course, like you guys said, he returns to the WWE after all this. He as during WWE's tribute, they said he returned home. And at the end of the day, I think we all see him as a WWF, WWE guy, right? Like that's
Yeah.
he. I mean, he is the WWF, right? Like he's the guy. Like we said, you chased Hogan. You didn't chase a heel. The heels chased Hogan. And he gets he comes back to arguably a match that is almost as big, if not as big, as the Andre match. And that's him and The Rock.
Unreal.
And again, is this a masterpiece of a match as far as technical standpoint goes? No. Can I show this match to a wrestling school? Mozart, we talked about training stuff. You can't show the Hogan Rock match to a training school and be like, look at what they did. You need to emulate that. Because if you're not Hogan and you're not The Rock, you can't do that.
Right.
That's not something
that doesn't work with anybody else. Hogan and The Rock are the only two people that works with.
Yeah, like that's what I'm saying. Like me and Mozart can't go out and have a match right now and do the stare down that they did, which I believe it's Earl Hebner said it, because I think he's the ref in the match.
Okay.
Or he was still involved in the company at the time, and he talks about, if you look in the beginning of the match, it looks like they're talking trash to each other. You come to find out later, and again, we're pulling the curtain back a little bit, it's them talking to each other about switching roles, because they didn't expect the crowd reaction. Rock went in there as a heavy baby face, And when they got in there and the way the crowd was flip-flopping on them, they made the conscious decision to do the double turn. And man, again, Hogan reading the room, Hogan and Rock reading that room and knowing that that's what they should do.
That's a match, Steve. If I'm training kids now, and I don't know that we ever referred to anybody to that match. Don't know that I didn't either. But they were already had to be advanced, work some shows, understand crowd reaction. Because to just take a new student and say, "Hey, this is where I want you to be." Now, don't watch the moves. Who cares about that? Because number one, they're not going to understand not to watch the moves. Just watch, because I had always heard that too. That conversation was directly about that. Now, a lot of things to peel back there. You have to be at their level to change that and not get fired.
Exactly.
Because if we were to go out and do that right now, hey, you guys had no business changing that, would probably be the conversation. But, as we walk into the locker room, and rightfully so. But again, at that level, knowing both of those guys, what they had already earned, they did the right thing. And it would have been crapped on had they not. So to be able to read the room like that, and that's to me why it was it's one of my favorite matches as an adult for that reason. Not because they did anything, electrifying in terms of move sets or anything, but it was what they didn't do in terms of moves was just as electrifying as watching, a triple threat, match between Malenko Guerrero and, Benoit, or whoever it would have been, It was very, very exciting. But again, think about what I was saying. I don't mean to insult anybody. This is just what I've learned being in wrestling for God knows how long. Mainstream appeal. The guys that I just said were getting there. But again, it wasn't the mainstream appeal that a Hogan or The Rock will ever have. Because again, both these guys were major movie stars, major people outside of the wrestling business. Matter of fact, if anybody could rival Hogan in terms of what we have been talking about for hour or so, it would be The Rock. There is no other comparison. It's not Cena. No offense, it's definitely not Cena.
No.
That's a different conversation for a different time. It's The Rock. There's only two guys that reach that pop star level outside of wrestling. There's a lot of guys that are known. We wouldn't have been watching, Jelly Roll and Randy on a major, as you said, due to Hulk. Let's throw it back to Hulk. You're not going to have those guys on a major. I don't think it's prime time, but a major late night show.
Yeah.
With a major celebrity, because Jelly Roll's no joke as a celebrity either. He's huge in the music industry. You wouldn't have had that kind of crossover appeal had it not been for Hulk Hogan. That's the reason that this show is important. That's the reason the tributes are important, because literally the business, the wrestling business and the wrestling art and the wrestling sport is all kind of riding on what happened in 1984, I think it was,
84.
when he dropped that leg drop on the Iron Sheik.
March of 84, I believe, is what it is.
Yeah. It and then when I went back and watched that footage too, when you watch him break out of the camel clutch, well, to my knowledge, nobody had broken the camel clutch at that point in time. So now you're seeing this guy it really was a special time. And the guy, he has to get some credit too, because it's not all, well, obviously he is, but he has to get a lot of the credit. It's Vince's vision. But Vince's same exact vision with any other person doesn't really work, does it, Steve? Does it, Howard? In my opinion, that's a question.
I don't think so. And here's the thing: is even if he has the same vision with someone else, let's say, like we said, Snuka, or we could take anyone else that's on their roster at that time. You have the JYDs that are out there. You have guys that are great baby faces. Are they able to jump in the foxhole with Vince, so to speak? Because Hogan and Vince put their head down and just ran. They just went. And does that work with Macho? Does that work with Snuka? Does that work with like we said, does it work with Steamboat? Does it work with all these other guys? I know, like, he's so flip-floppy as to whether or not he's a real face or a heel, but like, you could say Hogan too. Hogan worked a heel style.
Yeah.
Hogan was willing to get down and dirty in a match, and he's one of the only baby faces that would work heel stuff. Now then, the other guy that I'll say maybe, and it doesn't work because of you can't trust him at the end of the day, and that would be Jake. Maybe Jake the Snake Roberts is able to pull the same mainstream appeal, but that's a big maybe. Like I'm reaching for that one, and I'm only saying it because he can do the talk, and he's. But when Hogan got there, Jake's still technically a heel.
Yeah.
So like he's not being viewed at that. So I don't think he can. I think Hogan is the only guy that could put the helmet on with Vince in the huddle and say who wants to hook up for this last play to win the game. And Hulk's
and you look, hold on, Hulk is the guy, yes. But you look at, WrestleMania was what? The first one was 85. But
yes.
before that, you had at least 2 or 3 Starcades before that, because Starcade was always built as the granddaddy of them all, right?
Yeah.
And there was, bar none, early 80s, probably no better pure wrestling product than what Jim Crockett Promotions was producing, especially those Starcades, those big mega shows that he was doing. But the thing that lacked where Starcade is that WrestleMania brought was the star power. Look at all the celebrities from WrestleMania 1, all the A-list actors, performers, whatever they really had the best people in the business. They had Liberace there, they had Billy Martin there, they had the Rockettes there. At points they had Muhammad Ali there. Mr. T was there, Cyndi Lauper. All of these people were big-time players in Hollywood at the very first WrestleMania that Vince really mortgaged everything on.
Yep.
And really put it on the back of Hulk Hogan to say, if this doesn't happen, we're all broke come tomorrow morning.
Yeah.
And he took it, and as the saying goes, the rest is history.
I mean, you get if WrestleMania isn't working, or if WWF isn't running the way it is, and Hulk Hogan doesn't run the way he does, and he's not on the A team to promote WrestleMania, so to speak, and all of a sudden, not only do we not get WrestleMania 1, but we might not get we say not get WrestleMania 1, and obviously if you don't have 1, you don't have 2, but you don't get Piper versus T at 2, and you don't get, and we could argue how much the drop off was for 2, but at the same time, we definitely don't get 3.
We don't, right.
We don't see 4. We don't see 4 and 5 in Atlantic City in a row, and then we don't get, and you don't see 6 up in the Sky Dome in what I consider one of the biggest crowds since 3, with Hogan versus Warrior. And that show also influenced an entire generation of wrestlers to come. So Hogan's style might not influence us. Hogan's style didn't influence how I wrestled, and I know he didn't influence how Mozart wrestled. That doesn't mean that Hogan didn't influence me in the ring. If Hogan didn't exist, I don't have a job in the wrestling business, because the wrestling business isn't what it is. I don't believe in saying your prayers, eating your vitamins, and training. So I don't go from being a 5'2" kid in my freshman year of high school to being the Adonis you see before you.
I think if there was a direct influence on me, and maybe it's not such a direct influence, it was as I started out, I was a heel, and I always wanted that baby face to be able to do what Hogan did. So we would even say, like, we would even use the term, this is where you Hulk up on me. Now, maybe they didn't do the exact same thing Hogan did with but they hulked up, right?
Yeah.
So we were using that term. There was a direct impact on our ring psychology, on our style, not as a performer in terms of what moves I wanted to do, what moves I could do, what I liked. It was more of I want this vibe. I want you coming back like that. Again, being able to see my buddy, the Cheetah Master, who was was honestly the independent version of Hulk Hogan. I mean, could just, the crowd just roared. I mean, 5 or 6 minutes of Welcome to the Jungle, he's still running around there playing it again because the crowd can't get enough of him in his entrance. But that was Hogan. Like you said, he could walk to the ring at WrestleMania 3 and let that song play out. I can remember early on watching him come to the ring to Eye of the Tiger, and I was
Yep.
like, oh my God, like he is going to tear somebody apart. Like you
Yeah.
just felt that as a little kid, So I guess even more than I ever thought there was an influence on me, because I was like, oh, I wasn't the guy when I was being interviewed. Oh, why'd you get into wrestling? I was like, well, I saw Hulk Hogan. I wasn't ever that guy. But what I did see, there was an indirect influence, at least, probably
At
more of a
least.
direct influence than I thought, in terms of when I'm putting together matches. I can remember saying, okay, so this is where you should Hulk up on us. You know what I mean? This is your comeback. And if they weren't supposed to Hulk up, it's like, well, don't Hulk up, but I want you to start coming back. So you always use that, because if they were going to Hulk up, they were coming back and they were going to kick your ass. Maybe that's not what was right at that point in time or whatever. So we definitely knew the influence on everybody. I don't think there's anybody that stepped in the ring that sends him that probably doesn't have some type of, even if you're not like a fan of his work. And I always I try to hold judgments on people's work, because listen, if I were standing in the ring with Hogan today, he could probably take me down and do some stuff I had no idea he could do, right? So I'm not going to judge there. It's like, okay, again, you did what you had to do. Less is more. Nobody sold more. Nobody put more. Nobody made the house. He made the house.
He
In
made the
terms
house.
of wrestling,
He built the house. Like
he built
we
the
talk
house.
about the house.
Hmm.
The house was built with bricks from Hulkamania.
Yeah, that's a
Literally.
great way to put it. It
Yeah.
exactly is, man. I think that, for me, when I had read that he passed, at first I thought, oh, it's just some more BS, because it's like, oh, here we go, because the wrestling world is a lot of nonsense and stuff. But then it starts, like TMZ Sports. Okay, some stuff that usually WWE or the families would go to first, and it's like,
And
all
then
right,
all
I
of a
don't.
sudden, yeah, I think it was when I saw it on like Fox Sports. I was like, oh,
Yeah.
this is real. This is real. Like I was like, because I
Hmm.
saw it first, I had the same reaction you did. Was, oh no, this isn't real. This is just
Yeah.
more crap. And then I saw like site after site after site, and I was like,
And
this
you
isn't
don't
fake.
think of a world, especially a guy who still looked, again, he's always looked that age pretty much since he was like 25. So it's like he never looked like he really aged so much. So it's like, is this real? Like, what? And the only thing that made me kind of think maybe it was Howard and I were talking a few weeks ago about, because remember, Howard, I even said, well, what's the real severity of this? Is just somebody putting out nonsense again,
Right.
or
Yep.
is he really in a hospital? Whatever that piece of news was that came out. Yeah, I don't know, because again, you can't think of a guy who's literally the immortal Hulk Hogan. Like, he's not going anywhere. Like, where's he going? I didn't
Right.
even know his age, to be honest with you,
Yeah.
because you didn't even think about it. It's just like, here's a dude who still probably has 19, 20-inch arms, and still tan and golden, and his face is a little more wrinkled, but aren't mine is too. You know, um,
Listen, his biggest wrinkles are right here, and it's from him smiling while he was counting all that money in the
that
'80s,
you
man.
know
Like,
what? You're exactly right too. It was. Um,
You know what I just thought of as you guys were talking about, and we were talking about the believability of when we first heard it, because we heard he'd been in the hospital and been sick for a little while, and just the image of Jimmy Hart being by his side as he's passing, and I don't know if it happened or not, but I could just hear Jimmy on the megaphone. Come on, Holker, just one more time, just one. You got it, baby. You got it, baby. And just delivering that promo that, listen, Hulk's got one more kick out, and he's going to make it. And to see Jimmy on that stage at SmackDown, just visibly broken, was something that I'd never seen Jimmy Hart like that.
that was sad.
In my life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
that was, yeah, that was really, really sad. I'm gonna, because we're gonna come to closing out soon, so I'm gonna say something that I feel like needs to uplift us a little bit. Hulk Hogan is immortal. He's going, everything that Hulk
Mm-hmm.
Hogan has done for this industry, for me, for you guys, for this business, for the world, that is going to last forever. There is
Absolutely.
never going to be a point where we think about pro wrestling and someone doesn't associate Hulk Hogan with it. And I think that makes him immortal. I would say this, and again, Mozart, Howard, we're all kind of wrestling historians. Hulk Hogan will be the name that's remembered before even Flair, maybe before I think if we're talking about it, it's going to be like Hogan and The Rock at this point are going to be the two guys that we're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
And also, if Hogan, I know we keep saying if Hogan doesn't, if Hogan's not there, there's no Scott Steiner.
Nope.
Or at least no Big Papa Pump Scott Steiner.
Right. No big right.
There's no Cena. If there's any guy in the last 25 years that's worked a Hogan-esque style, it's John Cena. John Cena was the 3 punches and the leg drop. He just called it the 5 moves of doom.
Right.
He's Hogan. And God bless him, because he's the only guy that could have granted more wishes than Hogan ever did.
Yeah.
So, listen, he's a 2-time Hall of Famer. He deserves to be a 2-time Hall of Famer. He absolutely deserved to go in on his own. I don't know what else to say about this man, because we could talk Hulk Hogan and his accomplishments until, we're recording on Sunday night. We could be recording until Monday morning and still be talking about Hulk Hogan accomplishments. I want to thank you guys for coming on, because I know I took a couple days to get this show together. There was a lot of reasons for that. So Legion, I want you to understand, part of it was me getting myself mentally ready for the fact that one of my childhood heroes passed away. And Mozart, I know we talked about Ozzy passing away on the episode that you and I did. This is that for me.
Yeah.
This Hogan passing away is Ozzy passing away for you. Like, if I find out next week that Steven Tyler died, I'm gonna, I'm just gonna go out in the backyard and end it all, because I don't want to do it.
I was weirded out by the whole week because Malcolm Jamal Warner passed. He drowned. Was basically only a few years older than me, and I'm like, wow, man! I watched this dude on the Cosby Show when I was a kid. Ozzy just took the wind out of my sails. Although I'll say, yes, obviously he wasn't in the greatest of health, but Oz was a huge part of my childhood, and wrestling too. Let's not forget Oz was there at WrestleMania 2 and made plenty of visits to wrestling over the years. But again, mainstream star who transcended music. By the time I had heard about Hogan, I think I was just, there's a couple of things for me. So being in wrestling this long, and I think Steve and Howard, I've talked to you both about it. Whenever we lose somebody, there's a certain numbness for me, because it's just like, it's almost like weekly, like we lose somebody, right? All those childhood heroes, like you just said, 3 of the 4 guys that you mentioned from the NWO and Gene Okerlund are gone, and it's hard to swallow. So I think I've not really fully processed it, because I was still banged up. I'm still listening to Ozzy on Sirius like every day, and But the more that I've seen of Hogan, and the more that I talk about it, the more I realize how he definitely did impact me. And everybody's broken out the "what you gonna do, brother" at some point in time, screwing around. So this is a guy who's larger than life. And I'll say this, because I know you're wrapping up too. I saw the stats the other night on SmackDown. I wanted to watch that show to see exactly. I love the tribute pieces to him, just brilliantly done. But the one stat I saw, they had like if I'm right, he was I don't think only 12 times world champion, right? So everybody said, oh, well, Cena this and Flair that. First of all, I want to really reiterate that the number of championship reigns doesn't really matter, and never should. Because number one, they've kind of bastardized it and watered it down so much. But I'll use that to say that, so Hogan's 12. Pretty much everybody at this point has 12 title reigns, because that's how modern wrestling is. But the impact of what he did, if he only had one, and he still was the same guy that we knew, the same persona, would have still impacted the business more. Like you said, maybe the only other guy might be Ric Flair, The Rock, in terms of outside But I will say too, Flair in the early '80s when this came probably wasn't the guy to do it because it took Flair another decade and a half to become that super mainstream outside where sports stars were hanging around with him and things. Took him a little longer to break out of that inside wrestling status and become a pop star. He is now for sure.
Oh, absolutely.
But Hogan was that, I think, from the minute that that leg landed on the Sheik. I mean, it
I,
just,
I, I mean,
you know,
you win the title in Madison Square Garden, it does
yeah,
something different for you. At least it
it's
did
the
then.
mecca. Well, it still is because it's the entertainment capital of the world, New York
Exactly.
City. They took a guy who was the not just the prototypical American hero, but the prototypical superhero. And it was like Thor combined with Superman. So you got the looks of Thor and Superman's invincibility. I mean, they lightning in a bottle, man. That's the only thing I can say. And I want to say thanks, Hulk Hogan, for everything that you did for wrestling, brother. We're gonna miss you, even though I didn't know you personally. I'm still gonna use the term when I want that comeback. Hey, man, I need you to Hulk up.
That's what I'm saying.
So
Guys, I want to thank you for coming on again. And Legion, I want to thank you for sticking around with us for about an hour and a half to talk about such a big influence on this business. And anytime someone talks about the house from now on, I want, like I said before, I want everyone to remember that house was built with bricks from Hulk Hogan, from Hulkamania in his garage at this point, because there's no other way to think about that. Howard, I love the fact that you came on the show. This is the first time I've had you on our show. Mozart, I'm going to keep bringing you back, man, because at this point,
I'll keep
this
coming because I just have a blast. Howard couldn't get rid of me. Ask him.
Yeah, I asked him to come around for one time, and I've been stuck with him ever since, Steve.
see that, and I have a feeling like now that's what's going to happen with me. Is like all of a sudden I'm going to get a text, yo, you need a second
Yeah.
tonight,
Right.
But
but
I
I
have
know
a
what's
blast with
cool is that you
Mozart. I have a
bring,
blast with you guys. I love talking wrestling, man. I love it.
yeah.
I'm just real quick, just to wrap up Hulk Hogan on my end. I've seen a lot of Hulk Hogan matches live on TV and everything, but I just seen it the other day. It came back up on my Instagram feed, and it hit a little differently today, or the other day when I think it was yesterday when I saw it. Was that little kid? He's I don't know 6, 7 years old that goes
oh yeah,
into
when
Hulk
he does
Hogan's
the whole
shop,
promo.
does the whole promo, and I'm like, wow. Like, and I mean, this kid, didn't see the Hulk Hogan that I saw, didn't even see the Hulk Hogan that you saw, but saw Hulk Hogan and and did what he did. I thought it was just incredible, and it just shows you that there's a grandfather to a father to a son to a grand, all the way down, 4 or 5 generations of people in a family that he's affecting.
Listen, I before we close out, I had a little kid come to, so in my real life, I tend bar, and I had a little kid at the bar with his mom at the hotel that I work at, and I had wrestling on, and this little kid pulled his chair up and started watching. He never watched wrestling. He's 7 or 8 years old, and I looked at the mom and I said, "I'm so sorry because I just did this to you," and that's what Hulk Hogan did to me.
Yeah.
Like that's like you said, I don't have a son right now. So that kid took that place. Like you said, grandfather, my great grandfather was a wrestling fan. My father is a wrestling fan. I'm a wrestling fan. I turn little kids into wrestling fans because that's, I'm like the I'm the professional uncle. And
Right.
I don't know. It's something that and again, this is because of Hulk Hogan that I have this love for this business and this sport and this form of entertainment, whatever you want to call it, this art form that I do. And again, Hulk Hogan, thank you.
Yes.
Howard,
Thank
thank you.
you.
Mozart, thank you. Guy,
Thank you, Steve.
Yeah. Thank
I'm not going to close out how I normally do. So instead, I'm going to hit with one last, what you going to do, brother?
I love it.